Shayak, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
All good. Thanks, Ashu, for having me here. Pleasure.
Uh, Pleasure's all ours, Shaik. This is a session which is long in the making, right? And you're doing this for us on the go. We can't be thankful enough, right? Like I said, Shaik, it's great to have you with us. Also, Eunimart is something which is empowering businesses, right? The domestic businesses to kind of expand into global markets, right? I think there is nothing more powerful than creating a very export-sensitive and driven economy, right? We've seen, a lot of countries, for example, get to the scale and size that they have, largely because of exports, right? And I think, it also sort of becomes very, very critical, right? Especially when you kind of it's a large ship, right? You have to drive employment, so on and so forth, right? It's very interesting. So I think with that context, it's a great discussion that we're looking forward to, right? But before we do that, I'd love you to introduce yourself quickly, and we move into talking more about nuances of selling.
Sure. So a little background about me. I'm Shayak. I'm the founder and CEO of Eunimart. As you correctly mentioned, it's a platform that helps small businesses go global, sell across the world. I'll talk a little bit more about it down the line. A little bit background about me. I started my career in the Indian Navy back in 2003. I used to be a nuclear biological chemical warfare specialist, a helicopter operator, and one of the youngest officers in the history of the Navy to make it to staff rank. So by the time I was 24 years of age, I was already leading 200-man teams, $100 million project, and all that sort of stuff. So I had a lot of fun in the Navy. I left the Navy in 2012. I started a few small hotels and restaurants in Goa, by the beach in Kalangut and Candolim.
Right.
They did fabulously well. And in 2 years, we went from just about nowhere to rank number 8 in all of Goa. Right.
Wow.
So that was a fantastic experience running a customer-centric business with almost no money, no capital. It was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of hard work. From morning 7 a.m., I used to be in the parking lot, paying out commissions to the touts, to the taxi drivers, to the bus drivers to bring me traffic.
Right.
All the way to about 2 a.m. in the night when I used to patrol the hotel just to make sure that druggists, prostitutes don't enter and trouble my guests, because I wanted it to get a family reputation.
Sure.
So I did all that sort of stuff. I built my own websites, partnered with Sunburn and the casinos and nightclubs and everything. Like you could go anywhere in north of Goa and you'd see Planet Goa pasted. So that's something special that we did there. And as a result, we went from nowhere to rank number 8 on TripAdvisor in just about 2 years. Finished that, and then I realized that wasn't creating the kind of impact that I wanted to create. So from there, I headed out and I did my MBA at INSEAD, which is one of the world's best business schools. Post that, I joined the Rocket Internet Group. I was posted in Paris, and I was heading cross-border e-commerce across 21 countries. That included LATAM, Africa, South Asia, and China. 21 countries. The whole geography. I established the business vertical, grew the group's gross merchandise value by about 30% in that 1 year. And that's where I got my inspiration to start Eunimart. So I came back to India in 2016. Early 2017 is when we started Eunimart.
Very interesting. That's some journey, right? I think not a lot of people will get close, right? Absolutely spectacular, right? I think it's going to inspire many others to cross over, which is very important, right? Now coming to Eunimart, right? I think everybody is an aspirant, right? In business, everybody wants to sell, get into exports, right? Cross-border is something which is always exciting, right? And that's largely because the earnings are very, very the arbitrage is very exciting, right? Predominant of that, right? Not a lot of people are able to do that because it's a complicated market, right? There are many laws on both sides, right? And it's complex, it's complicated, right? The requirement and management of, for example, financial aspects also becomes very, very critical, right? There's a lot of that complexity which is important. And what I kind of mentioned of is possibly 10, 15, 20% of this, right? It goes beyond that, right? Consumer side expectations, for example, is again a big sort of a problem, right? Identifying people on the other side, who can possibly be a counterpart. I think so. This is one sort of an area which is plagued with many problems, right? While there are industries which is all for it, right? They've got to institutionalize the process. So it's still not something which is available for industries across the board, right? Tell us a little more about what Eunimart is doing, right? And solving all of these challenges for businesses that want to sell in other ones.
So I'll break this conversation into two halves, right? The first half, I'm going to talk a little bit about what cross-border commerce is and why is it so difficult.
Sure.
You touched upon it when you mentioned regulations, but typically that's the last thing that somebody solves.
Right.
There are many other issues that you need to solve. And then the second half of my conversation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Eunimart does and why it is so unique, right?
Sure.
So let's start with cross-border commerce. Now, as you rightly mentioned, almost every other government out there wants to bring in foreign exports because the net of exports and imports is what drives GDP, right? Because at the end of the day, government consumption or private consumption is not going to drive GDP beyond a point. The real growth comes in from net of exports and imports. And you've seen that in China, where they've become a net exporter over the last 30 years and one of the biggest net exporters in the world. And that's kind of what you can do. Now, obviously, if you look at the history of India, we used to be, if you go outside and you start asking people, what is India known for? People will tell you spices, people will tell you software. But there are not many other categories that people remember India for. And that is a shame because there's a whole bunch of different things that India produces and excels at producing. Now, there are a few laws in India, obviously, the small business laws, which prevent you from setting up manufacturing units with more than 100 people. Because if you do that, then you convert into a big enterprise and then you cannot shut it down if your business starts winding down. Right? So those are systemic issues that you cannot do much about. They're getting corrected. There were customs issues that used to be massive even 5 years ago, but with the implementation of the new courier shipping bills, etc., it's become a lot easier. There were foreign governments, particularly China, trying to take big advantage of India's opportunity by pushing in and dumping a lot of stock in India at very low costs and trying to break our industry here. And that has been stopped to a large extent by the government by implementing specific digitization and courier shipping bills and all that. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to talk about the 5 elements that need to come together to enable a business to sell cross-border. From a business perspective, it is called, first of all, you need to have the shipping and supply chain. Then you need to have the finances, then you need to have the marketing, then you need to have the operations, and last and the most important, you need to have the right channels of sales. So imagine I want to sell in the US, which is where most people want to go. If everybody's trying to get into the US, do we know what the duties and taxes will be? Do we know what is the cheapest way to ship to the US? Do we know that if I manage to ship to the US, what happens when a product gets returned? These are questions that are answered within the ambit of shipping and supply chain. So here what we do is we provide 30 different shipping partners with negotiated rates, so sellers can sell from anywhere to anywhere. They can ship from anywhere to anywhere. But in addition, we also provide a bunch of fulfillment partners in US and different geographies, which means you can take a certain consignment, you can send it out to that particular geography, you can hold it there, and when you get an order, you can fulfill from there. Plus, what we've done is we've created duties and taxes calculators, which will automatically take a look. It's AI, or artificial intelligence, takes one look at your image and your title and automatically identifies the duties and taxes that you're likely to pay. And from there, builds that into your landed cost. So once you know what your landed cost is, then you know what your landed price should be. Because I've seen hundreds of merchants who don't understand this take a loss because they thought, hey, I'm going to sell for 150 rupees and I'm going to take a 50 rupee profit home. That 50 rupee got wiped out when the duties and taxes came into the picture. Okay, so shipping, supply chain, all the way from sourcing to distribution to fulfillment to warehousing in those geographies, having a bunch of shipping options, knowing what your duties and taxes are. That's the first part. The second part of it is knowing how to manage your operation. So that means cataloging, that means orders and inventory, that means managing your pricing, your discounts on a daily basis. Once again, we've covered a lot of this using AI. So for example, if you upload an image and a title, our system automatically, like a human being, understands what that product is, writes the best description, brings out the best keywords, automatically sets the prices on a daily basis, and optimizes it for each new channel that you're selling. So now you don't have to go and figure out the SLAs per channel or figure out how you're going to sell on each new channel of sale. This, by the way, was 98% of the problem statement. I'm not kidding you. 98% of the merchants were not able to go live because they couldn't figure this bit out. And we automated everything out of it. Then, of course, you have to figure out your marketing, your discounting. Once again, we do demand and supply prediction, marketing prediction using AI. So what we do is we understand how much your products might sell, what a certain amount of discounting can do for you, or what certain amount of ads can do. And then we push that into different channels like Google and Facebook and Amazon. Plus, what we do is we have AI chatbots that once customers come to your portal, they will talk to customers and do that, right? Also, language localization, currency localization, document localization, all this forms part of operations. So all of this is a operations layer.
Right.
And lastly, I think figuring out the channels of sales. This is the most critical and the most difficult piece, because everybody goes to Amazon.
Sure.
But in every geography other than Amazon, like in India, if you think about it, Meesho, Shopclues, Myntra, Purple, Nykaa, God knows how many different channels are there. Now, are you capable of selling on all these channels? No, not really, because each channel has different SLAs, different processes, and you're trying to figure that out.
Sure.
What we do is we've created layers of automation to do that bit, right?
Okay.
So you don't need to sit and figure out how to do cataloging on Nykaa. System does it for you. How to sort out an order on Nykaa, or which shipping partner to use, or how to ship it out. All you need to do is figure out how to sell. We do the rest, right? So long story short, I think cross-border is a ridiculously complex game because it changes by country. Every regulation changes. So if you're not going to build true deep tech solutions that will understand the problem and dynamically shift on a daily basis, you're not going to really solve the problem, and merchants are not going to get the orders. That's cross-border. But then when you talk about what Eunimart does, Eunimart is essentially a 3-tiered structure, right? So layer 1 is what we call the orchestration layer. In this layer, as I mentioned, you've got 30 plus shipping partners, 35 warehousing partners, 35 different channels of sales. You've got marketing partners. So we've got like 100 partners around the world integrated. Everything from ERP and POS systems to marketplaces to everything. Sure. So now in this layer, it manages the whole business for you, and you don't need to do anything for yourself. Layer 2 is what we call the software layer. Here we have everything from warehousing, fulfillment, distribution, shipping, bots, and all that sort of stuff. And layer 3 is AI. Here we have all this deep tech solutions that will help you to understand what the demand might be, how to optimize your product features, your pricing, and everything, so that you get more orders. So these are the 3 tiers: the orchestration layer, the software layer, and the AI layer. And this whole thing is built out in an open source architecture, which means imagine you want to build this business, you can take my software and build your own solutions on top of it. You can build your own apps. You can integrate your own partners. You don't need to wait for me to do anything. I've opened it up for you to use. So that is what is unique about Eunimart. Cross-border, omni-channel, open source, AI. There is no platform on earth that does what we do.
Very interesting. You in a way answered the question that I was just kind of about to pose you, right? Now, for a market, and this is essentially what I understand, right? What I want to understand. For a market which is like India, right, where there is very little exposure, right? This is a lot of complexity, right? And typically, ecosystems like, for example, Amazon, right? Where there are sellers, who've gotten familiar with large data, and it still continues to be the largest volume mover, right? For a large percentage of sellers, right? Other platforms, while they're kind of picking up, they are where they are. Has certain specializations, right? The consumer perception is something which is very, very definitive in many cases. Right? Are they expanding? The answer is yes, right? But their category, they lead or they have lead categories, right? When the volumes continue to be more exciting, right? Now, Amazon, for example, right? One such case, gives you the option and the flexibility to sell across other geographies, predominantly US, right? Now, while there are other ecosystems that are available, right? What's the shift like? And for example, I'd love to understand a case study. Right? So, for example, a seller in India, when he's or she's selling across, say, multiple other formats, what's the kind of, what percentage of sales is coming from Amazon, and what, for example, is the impact of others in the process, right? Would love to understand this a little more in detail.
So I think this question has to be answered in 3 levels. One is at the marketplace level, one is at the merchant level, and one is at the process level. So let's take first the marketplace level. Today, Amazon wasn't the first mover. eBay was. eBay pioneered cross-border e-commerce in India, and there were thousands of merchants from north and west and south of India who were selling cross-border thanks to eBay. eBay had massive teams, and they were the first. The second was Alibaba and AliExpress, who took thousands and thousands of Indian merchants global, and they got a lot of orders.
Right.
What Amazon did was Amazon systematically opened up the market the way I'm talking about. Neither eBay nor Alibaba decided to do it that way. They did it ad hoc to their advantage, where they chose the merchants that they wanted to, but did not create a system where anybody could come and do whatever they wanted to do. But Amazon did. So Amazon Global Selling is the pioneer when it comes to how to enable a market to go and sell cross-border. So today, Amazon enables Indian sellers to sell in Europe and North America, and if you're lucky, maybe Japan. Here's where the difference is. There are plenty of other marketplaces that are following suit today. You wouldn't believe how many marketplaces are powering cross-border e-commerce today, and how many of them are actually coming to us to power their cross-border e-commerce today. There's a bunch of e-commerce marketplaces that are doing that, and we're literally behind the scenes for some of them. So I'm not going to take names, but quite a few of these are today looking at expanding Indian sellers internationally, because they see that this is the next, like if Elon Musk thinks Mars is the next opportunity, these Indian businesses think cross-border is the next big opportunity, and it is, especially with opening up of the laws in India, it becomes very, very lucrative. And in terms of the merchants, right, I think there is needed a certain amount of maturity from the merchant in order to be able to sell cross-border. If you're just starting out or you don't have any experience in selling, you don't know your products well, you don't know how to do the packaging or the shipping well, probably not a good idea to start cross-border, because you're going to take some losses in the beginning. It's better to find that out domestic. But then again, domestic and international are very, very different channels, right? Because domestic has very different laws, shipping rates are different, products that sell in domestic are different, whereas internationally what sells is very different. Now, what we do is we target mid to enterprise customers first. And when it comes to small businesses, we use stochastic algorithms to onboard them so that the complexity is not big. So let's say you go into YouTube. YouTube may have 100 million videos in it. I don't know how many they do, but let's imagine they have 100 million videos. It's not going to show you the whole database and make it very complex for you to find what you want. It's going to show you 3-4 videos. When you watch them, it understands what you like, what you don't like, and it's going to show you more and more depending on what you're doing. That's called stochastic onboarding. So when you come on our platform, what we do is stochastic onboarding. So we don't show the whole gamut of things that you need to do. We understand your stage and what you're doing, and then take you through the journey step by step. Okay. So for small businesses, that makes a massive difference, because it allows them to onboard easily, much more faster. And it also allows them to successfully go live. We've seen merchants who've grown their revenue 7 times, 8 times in one calendar year. Can you imagine growing your revenue 7 times in one calendar year? And that's exactly what's happening. So that question about what percentage of the revenues come cross-border to domestic, what percentage of the revenues come Amazon versus others, is historic data. That is not what should form the basis of our discussion. What should form the basis of our discussion is where is the trend line. And the trend line is today 25% of the traffic, 25% of the orders are cross-border. Tomorrow, this is going to become 50% of the orders. Now imagine an industry that moves from 0 to 50% in 10 years. Right? It took e-commerce.
Interesting. Shayak, I think this question becomes important, largely because, if there's one ecosystem, right, which gives you, which solves for you in a domestic market, right, something that you're familiar with, and can also solve for you globally, right, and possibly is 50% more, in terms of revenue that you're generating, right, and I'm not denying or disputing, your claims, right, of growth, right, in those markets. And that's largely because there's more disposable capital available, right? There's definite pension, right? And there are a variety of other factors that are moving through those economies, right? But as a business owner, I will continue to sort of largely stick to that one ecosystem, right? Avoid complexity, and I think when you're talking about a lot of mid-sized businesses, right? I think aspirationally they kind of, not everybody wants to, for example, and I think it becomes important in that context. But I'm going to move on to the next question.
No, but now just allow me a minute to expand on what you said. So I think that is something that would have been, say, true in 2017 when I was starting off. It's absolutely not true today, because I've seen the Indian business mindset shift from I want to be a vendor to Amazon, where I don't want to sell on Amazon, let Amazon buy and sell it by itself, to I want to be a seller on Amazon because I want to own the customer data, to hey, I now want to sell on multiple channels and I want to go omni-channel. You would not believe 8 out of 10 customers who come to me want to do omni-channel.
Sure.
This is real data. 8 out of 10 businesses that come to me want to do omni-channel, not Amazon.
Right.
And I'm talking about 60,000 merchants in India that sell more than a certain amount, and they're all looking at omni-channel. So this thing that everybody wants to stay only with Amazon because Amazon provides you with that is wrong, because businesses understand that sticking with one single business, let's say Amazon, here's what will really happen to you. Tomorrow Amazon increases the percentage commission by 2%, your business is dead. Tomorrow Amazon changes the rules of the game, your business is dead. So there are many reasons why, especially in developed countries, if you look at the West, there's a massive breakaway happening from Amazon. I'm not against Amazon. They're one of my major partners. But the reality is that no business wants to stay stuck to one channel or single.
No, I completely buy your point, right? I completely relate with what you're saying, 100%, right? And I very strongly believe that, as a business owner, you need a multiple channels, right, of doing what you're doing, right? But also the fact that, unfortunately, when you look at businesses in India, right, who are kind of sellers on Amazon, right, there's little access to, for example, financing support, right? And that's just, that's a general trend sort of that across India, right? Financing is difficult, and that just honestly, while there could be aspiration there, it kind of becomes a massive limiting factor, right? Also, the fact that a lot of other platforms, because of their communication strategy, overall perception in the consumer's mind, right? The expectation is very offtake, for example, right? So that just complex. It becomes a very complex,
No, but if you're able to do two things, sorry, I'm speaking really, but if you're able to do two things, one is, if you're able to transform that entire experience of selling across multiple channels into an experience where you're selling across a single channel, plus if you're able to provide financing, then you can solve that problem. So we've tied up with HSBC, we're tying up with other banks to directly give banks access to the sellers so that they can provide financing directly. One. And two, we are using our AI and our automation. We've managed to create the experience where the sellers are selling across one channel and not 10 or 20. That's the point of Eunimart. You don't have to ever go to Amazon or eBay separately. You're just on Eunimart, and from here you're selling wherever, and the algorithms are doing it for you.
Interesting. Shayak, I'm going to move to a consumer side question, right? Now, I think when you have sellers and you're kind of solving those sellers, it becomes important that you start looking at what's happening in the consumer market, right? And I think in a way you kind of touched upon this entire democratization of content, right? And how business, for example, has consumed content, right? I want to in the same context, I want to talk about the consumer, right? Now the consumer influence is something which has just become so much more dynamic. It's something which is changing very, very quickly, right? It's shifting very, very quickly, right? And in a way, it's kind of there's a certain with this shift, right? There's the environment has become very, very dynamic, right? So something that possibly sells today might not necessarily sell tomorrow, right? Now, fortunately, unfortunately, irrespective of whatever models that you talk about, right? It's very, very difficult to predict how, for example, a certain form of content gets created, how I absorb it, right? And at what timeline or eon it happens, right? I think there's this, literally we are essentially in a stage which is unknown, right? Now, especially, why it becomes important as part of this conversation, right? Is because when you're selling in a territory which is, away from yours, right? The behavioral tendencies can continue to be just so much more complicated, right? While you can solve for the businesses, right? While you can solve for regulations and variety of things which are clearly defined, right? These are not changing, overnight, right? There's a certain consistency. The consumer behavior is something which could just be so much more dynamic, right? What's your sense of it, right? As a player which is letting these businesses kind of expand in those territories? How complex is this problem turning out to be? What's your sense of it?
So I'd say, look, there are three major shifts in consumer behavior. One is consumers are moving from single channel to omni-channel buying behavior. So what's very relevant is like you would be doing it, your wife would be doing it, my mom does it. So you walk into a store, you look at something, you immediately look it up on mobile, and then you see what is better, what are the different options available, what are the different prices available, etc. So today malls are seeing an increase in footfall but a decrease in revenue. Today retail stores are seeing an increase in footfall but a decrease in revenue. E-commerce, on the other hand, saw a spike in revenue during COVID, but that has normalized to pre-COVID levels now. So which means that revenues across streams are reducing. And this is funny because people have not stopped buying or reduced buying. What's actually happening is that the revenue is now split across more channels than it ever has been in history, because people have access to information on internet. And so what they're doing is, even if they're buying at home, they're looking what is the closest place where I can go and check it out. So all these things, this is the first change from single channel to omni-channel. The second change that we're seeing is borderless buying behaviors. So platforms like Wish, Bonanza, Etsy, Amazon, Alibaba, etc., pioneering the cross-border buying behavior where you really don't know that you're buying cross-border. I'm not joking when I say that 1 in every 5 orders in India is cross-border, just India. And this is an imports-resistant country where we do not like international companies to come and sell. Even in India, 1 in 5 orders is international. It's just the way it is. In more advanced countries like US, a lot more orders are international. Second buying behavior change. But the critical buying behavior change, the third one is the buying cohorts have changed, which means that earlier people used to focus on a certain cohort from 21 to 45 and gender specific, whatever. Now, your buying cohort has changed so drastically that all the way from 5 to 90 people are buying, and they're actually buying real products with a lot of money. So what is happening? So this is one side of the story. Now let's look at it correspondingly from the brand side. Categories don't change overnight, right? So there are two kinds of businesses that build categories and businesses that sell within categories. And if you're a category builder and you want to build a new kind of toy that's going to, really take the market by storm, then your sole goal is to go and test out 100 toys out there and make that one toy that will take the market. And toy makers literally do that all the time, because that one toy maker wins the market, all other 99 toys go to waste. Those categories are dealt that. But almost all other categories don't work that. It's not like in fashion, one t-shirt takes the market. No. So in these categories, there's a broad swath of market where there are economic goods, mid-level goods, and luxury goods, right? So a brand typically specifies which particular segment they fall into, and in that category doesn't change overnight. Seasonalities affect, many things affect, but the products don't change overnight, right? So there are certain trend lines that you can observe. One thing, I did a study with Stanford University where we were trying to predict changes in fashion buying behavior, and we took data set from Amazon over 6 years, and we kept this study going. And to be honest, there was no trend line. 6 years of data from Amazon showed zero trend line, which doesn't mean that you can't predict. It just meant nothing changed. The basic product lines remain the same. The collars maybe shifted little and came back to it in 1 year, and again came back to it in 1 year. There was cyclicity in the market, but no trend line in the market. So categories like fashion, electronics, home and decor, home and living, handloom, handicrafts, these are categories that do well in cross-border because there is no trend line in it.
Interesting. Shayak, I think, so I understand where you're coming from, right? Now, what I'm saying is I'm actually going a little more micro, right? What I essentially am trying to sort of establish, right, is there's, for example, there's the seller, right, who's doing a certain variety of t-shirts, right? Now, in an environment which was, let's say, a pre-2020, right, you could have predicted that, X number of t-shirts are doing very well, right? Because, the category was such, right? And the market was essentially, there were many silos that existed, right? There was a physical and there was a retail, something that you touched upon as well, right? Now, 2020 has been a definitive shift, right? A large part of essentially consumption is happening online, right? So while discovery or, experiential engagement is something that would happen in an offline setting, right? A large part of the purchase continues to happen in an online setting, right? And that's largely because you have transparency, you have access to many other trends, varieties, all of that, right? Where I'm coming from is that, when as soon as, for example, and how content, for example, has gotten democratized, right? Where you are equally powerful than anybody else, right? I am equally powerful than anybody else, right? That has brought in a very different kind of a tendency, right? Now, what that exposes a lot of these manufacturers and suppliers to is eccentricity in buying behaviors, right? This is not seasonality, this is not cyclicity, right? This is something which is very fuzzy, right? And while I could have demand coming from wherever, there's possibly something, because there's a certain kind of a trend which is flying in an influencing ecosystem or an influences ecosystem, right? There could be a complete shift that can happen, right? What I'm essentially trying to sort of get to and I'm wanting to understand is that exposes suppliers and manufacturers to a very different kind of a risk, right? Their backends are not necessarily prepared for this. And when they're selling in a global ecosystem, right, so say across top 10 or 15 or 20 markets, right, that they aspire to be, that could become a massive complexity from a working capital standpoint, how their kind of ecosystem is aligned, how their supplier pieces are aligned and all that, right? So I'm not necessarily talking about, what's the middle layer, right? The middle layer is something which is predictable. Can you go out and sell to those markets? The answer is yes. Are there regulations that are predictable? The answer is yes. Is the consumer behavior predictable? And because of this shift that has happened, right? And content which is available from pretty much across the board, makes it very, very dynamic, right? How are you seeing this shift, right? Because this is a very different kind of complexity, something that we're not prepared for. No model globally, if you really look at it from a predictive standpoint, was ever designed for a market which is connected, right? And so transparent. Where the shift could be very, very pertinent and not necessarily manufacturers line, right? What's your sense of it? Does this, how do you see it settle down? Do you think, there are different models that are going to emerge, right? So while selling continues to happen, there could be different models that could sort of play out over a period of time, right? These are early days, right? When, some parts of it are kind of settling in, but these are early days, right? What's your sense of it? How do you see this entire dynamism and an overall equation playing out?
So look, the whole point is about the delta. Now, the question is, in what kind of categories do consumer influencer behaviors change, to what extent the sales? And secondly, can you predict demand to a certain amount of predictability when it comes to at an individual SKU level?
Sure.
Now, these are two different questions. So when it comes to the influencers part, I don't think the delta is significant enough when it comes to majority of the products in the market. There could be in specific luxury goods or specific high-end products, the delta is high, and we have seen that happen in certain products. But trust me, when we see the data across the board, across these categories that I'm talking about, like electronics, fashion, home decor and all, there is literally very minimal delta when it comes to shifting product lines, right? It does not change just because some influencer tweeted about it. It could happen to a particular SKU. It could happen to a particular SKU. It definitely does happen to a particular SKU. So that you may not be able to predict. But beyond that, no, there is very little delta, number one. And number two is, can you predict the demand to a certain amount of thing? If you have 12 months of data plus, you would be able to predict with a certain amount of assurance, but not accurately. So which means that there are so many variables at play: the channel, the geography, the consumer price indices, the seasonality, etc. It is not the consumer behavior that's driving that. It is basically a mix of several variables that is driving the consumer behavior in the first place. So if you can understand the underlying hyperparameters, you can then put them together, and you can also predict demand to a certain extent, but you cannot be fully accurate about it. That's not doable.
Interesting. So I think both of us kind of agree on that as far as that is concerned, right? And the complexity which we're kind of in the middle of, right? The business in the middle of. I think possibly calibrating quantities, I think, becomes the answer, right? I think not overexposing yourself, and I think you have a very role to sort of play. When it comes to I think those hygiene factors.
Yes, we do.
Right?
We do demand and supply prediction, network logistics optimization in terms of where to hold inventory, which inventory, how much inventory, which shipping options to use. So this is a question that we deal with in a lot of detail most of the time.
Right. Interesting. Shayak, I think incredible conversation, right? Good things have to come to an end. I'm saving many of the questions that I possibly would have wanted to ask, right? But I think with the limited time that we have, right? Moving on to a 2-year question, right? To a cliche, right? But also important. Like, what are the next 2.5 years like? What is it that you're preparing yourself for? It's an exciting market. The world is getting, content is kind of connected us, right? Especially in the last 2.5 years. I think commerce is kind of catching up, right? You're in a very, very exciting market, right? Because you're empowering many of these brands to sort of sell across those markets, right? What are the next 2.5 years like?
So Eunimart kind of sits at the intersection of 3 major industries. We're disrupting 3 industries at the same time: retail, e-commerce, and supply chain. So this is not easy, number one. So which is one of the reasons why we built it out in open source. So for me, the next 2.5 years is more about figuring out how this open source ecosystem will evolve, how developers will adapt to it and build their own solutions on top of it. Second is about cross-border expansion. So I've taken the business to US. I'm looking to take it to other geographies. And third is about expanding my AI and stochastic algorithms to enable even small merchants to trade using my platform. So these are the 3 goals. So hopefully in the next 2.5 years, we would have proved conclusively that this particular model can be shipped to, say, 20 different countries. It can be taken to a level where tens of thousands of merchants can come and successfully expand their revenues, and other businesses can build on top of my platform. So that's basically the goal.
Interesting. Shayak, this has been an absolutely spectacular conversation. Thank you for doing it, right? On the move, It was a pleasure.
I'm really sorry for the background noise. I'm sitting in an airport lounge. I am so sorry, but thank you for doing that.
No, I think this is all right, right? But I think an absolutely spectacular conversation, right? I mean, thank you so much for doing this, right? Like I said, right, there are many nuances to this game, right? And this is not an easy game, right? And I completely kind of resonate with what you're saying. I think what you possibly have against is one of the toughest pieces, right, to solve for, but a very interesting piece to kind of build and deal with, right? So. Many more questions, but I'm going to save some of that for our next conversation, right? Hopefully soon. A lot, for example, has to be discussed and understood and debated around the predictability of the environment, right? I think what has happened in the last 2.5 years is made markets very dynamic, right? So while you kind of solving for the more critical key challenges, right, which is availability, I think a lot more needs to, for example, be discussed around this dynamism and this the pace that with which the market is kind of changing, right? And I think while a large part of it possibly will not necessarily be able to, we might not be able to predict it, right? But I think with certain mechanical interventions, which would possibly happen through Eunimart and some of the other players in that space, right? I think the risk of doing business across these geographies could possibly be managed better, right? And that makes it exciting at a different level, right? But like I said, right, I'm saving some of this for our next conversation. It was a pleasure to have you, Shayak, and look forward to having you with us much sooner. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashu. You guys have a lovely day, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.